Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. Today, we are talking about strategic emotion management, where we get into boosting kids' emotional metacognition, or their ability to reflect on and make meaning out of their emotional responses. It's about thinking about feeling. Really, that's what it is. And it's really important because without it, kids will get swept away by emotion or stuck in whatever reaction mode that they're in. So we build this skill by having kids evaluate their emotional experience after the emotion is activated. Now, normally I'm all about being proactive, and we're going to definitely teach the skills, but really this emotional metacognition, it kicks in when we're able to identify what we're feeling, as well as how intense we're feeling what we're feeling. That's really important. So, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Is it helpful right now? With that skill, kids can learn to really pause and evaluate, if they need to, where is this emotion coming from? But more importantly, what is its purpose? What should I do about it, if anything? And so I've really laid the foundation the past few weeks. Definitely go and check previous episodes where I talk about the function of emotions and different ideas of what the emotion is trying to tell us and what we need in that moment. But this really helps them when they can pause and think about it, distinguish between helpful and unhelpful strategies. And so, this is the step that builds that bridge between emotion recognition, naming the feeling, which I've talked a lot about, and regulation, which is now we're doing something with it. This is really important. So, they need to understand that thoughts affect our actions, affect our feelings, affect our thoughts, and vice versa. I mean, they're all interconnected and they can be changed. Now, last week I was talking about cognitive appraisal, right? That really influences emotion activation. How do I interpret this event? If I see it as a challenge, I'm going to respond very differently than if I see it as a threat or if I see it as something funny, right? We know how we interpret a situation triggers our emotional responses, whether it's fear or anger or sadness or happiness, silliness. So, cognitive reappraisal is about looking at how we're interpreting the situation, right? They're interpreting external events or internal thoughts. And that happens before or during the emotional response. So, this helps, from a preventive lens, it really helps shape their emotional responses because now they can adjust how they're interpreting events. Again, there's lots of other things that we can be doing and focusing on building their resilience in the first place and lots more experiences, managing big, challenging situations, and their brain is automatically going to start reappraising. But if we're going to teach this explicitly, this is what we want to do. So we're turning, now we're turning to what happens after that emotion is already activated. Okay. So we're teaching kids how to evaluate their emotional state now that we're in it. And the shift from reacting to reflecting, that's where the strategic emotion regulation begins. So instead of automatically evaluating everything is threatening, right? I've got a test, it's threatening. Someone gave me a dirty look, it's threatening. We want kids to be evaluating. Is my anxiety during this test helpful? Is me running away every time someone looks at me not with a smile, is that helpful? Ideally, we want them doing this alongside the emotion so they can really think about it, right? They know when our prefrontal cortex, our self regulating rational brain is online, when we're calm, they know in the moment it's not helpful, like when they're feeling calm. But when the emotion is coming up, right? This is my reaction that I need to do. It might feel rational, but we really want to keep that prefrontal cortex online so they can really rationally, objectively evaluate it. It certainly influences our emotion modification and it shapes what they do with the emotion. But we're not getting them to change their emotion at all. We're not getting them to go from anger to happy. We just need them to identify the function of that anger. So the goal is increasing that emotional literacy, understanding I am angry and everything that's involved in that, and strategic emotion regulation. What is it that I'm going to do with that anger? It's a metacognitive process. And it involves identifying the feeling. So they need to have those words. That's why I spend so much time on building that emotional literacy. They need to be able to explore the function of the message of that feeling. That's why I've spent the past few weeks talking about the different functions of emotions, of those emotions. We want to assess whether that emotion is being helpful right now, right? Or the behavior that I want to do related to this emotion is helpful, right? What's going on? Is this emotion even accurate? Or is it a trickster? Is it like just an illusion that's trying to suck us into this spiral? Do I need to act on it right now? Right? What do I do with this emotion in a way that's actually helpful? It's in line with my goals, with what's important to me, right? That's really what we want to get kids to do. So let's say, just to give practical examples, let's say a teen gets back, a test and they think, they're praising the situation. A teacher left a comment on their paper and they see it as unfair. And so they're angry immediately. They're feeling angry. So rather than trying to find different explanations for the comment or any constructive feedback from the comment, right? That would be the reappraisal. We would want them to think about, what is the anger about? What is the anger, like what is it that they're trying to protect? So we're not trying to convince them it's helpful. We're not trying to change their thoughts. We're not trying to change the anger. If we really want them to manage that anger, it doesn't matter that it's about the test or the comments. This is the process anytime anger shows up. What is it that it's trying to protect? What do you want to do with that anger in a way that's actually going to be helpful? I mean, do you want to confront the teacher? Maybe that's what you want to do. Is that going to be helpful? Is letting it go helpful? Is seeking clarification helpful? What is going to be helpful, right? What is the behavioral reaction that's actually going to be helpful for you? So when we're teaching this, they do need to be aware of those automatic thoughts, the automatic feelings, right? So awareness is obviously the first skill, but we're building that metacognitive skill to be able to evaluate and reflect on those emotional reactions and choose how to respond. That's the goal here. That's going to help build their emotional literacy and regulation. So I've talked a lot about the functions of emotions to help us get to this point. So I can't stress enough, definitely check those previous episodes out if you missed them. We want to build a habit of emotional inquiry. That's what we're doing, where kids are learning to pause and ask really good questions. It's not just about, I'm feeling angry, right? They really need to think about, okay, what's the next step? So what am I feeling right now? Absolutely, they need to know that. And the more specific they can get, we know the better able they're going to be able to identify the best strategy for them. Because if they're just feeling stressed, well, is this stressed because I'm overloaded from sensory overload? Is it stress because I've got so much going on my plate that I don't even know where to start? I mean, those are going to be different strategies. So I'm feeling angry or stressed, whatever the feeling is, get really granular. What is that emotion trying to tell me? Is that emotion trying to give me helpful or unhelpful information in this moment? And how can I make it helpful, right? So the emotion might be helpful, but the thought associated with it might not be. Does this emotion and how I want to respond align with my goals or my values or with what's going to help me out the most, right? Is my emotion proportionate to the situation? I don't love big deal, little deal, to be quite honest. And so that's not one that I normally push because for them, it really is going to be a big deal. But I do need them thinking about, what do I want to do next in a way that's going to be helpful? Me punching the teacher, swearing at the teacher, screaming at the teacher, probably not going to be helpful for me in the short term or the long term. Do I want to act on it right now? Do I want to let it pass right now? Can I sit on it? Can I understand it better? It's just asking that. And sometimes it's just pause, right? Or sleep on it or whatever. Go for a walk and then we come back to it. For younger kids, we're using maybe stories or cartoon scenarios. For older kids, we can really encourage journaling, or we're getting into that Socratic dialogue. We're asking all these open-ended questions. They can use a chart. I like, I created the chart of different emotion functions to see the emotions as messages, not problems. Check out the emotional literacy book that I have accompanying with this as well. It's in the show notes. That can be helpful just to look at that. So, let's say, give another example. A teen is feeling angry because they were excluded. So rather than jumping to suppression or venting or blowing up, they can pause and reflect. Okay, I'm feeling angry. I'm also feeling excluded, left out, lonely. But the anger right now, it's really telling me I care about belonging, or this loneliness, disappointment, whatever it is. It's telling me that I care about belonging. Now, do I want to address this directly now while I'm fired up and yell at my friends? Well, that's not going to be really connecting, is it? Or do I need to take a break, right? I don't want to harm my friendships. These friendships are really important to me. So maybe I just need to take a break. So it's this internal dialogue. That's really the core of strategic emotion management. For a younger kid, maybe we have a 10-year-old who comes home and, she's slamming her backpack down and she's yelling, I hate school, right? Instead of jumping into problem solving mode, which we want to do as parents or as adults, let's validate. Whew, sounds like you had a tough day. And then say nothing. Actually, everything that I'm teaching you right now, this strategic emotion management, it's a top-down process. They need to have their prefrontal cortex online to do any of this work. The emotional brain takes over, right? And if the emotional brain takes over, there's nothing that they can do. It takes a lot of cognitive resources, a lot of effort. It's very difficult for them to do this. So you can't just talk about it and hope that they can do it. But I will say, co-regulation is bottom up. Now, if you are co-regulating, you are able to tap into the body and the emotional brain, which is stronger than that self-regulating brain. And so we are creating that space. That's why co-regulation, I'll do a whole episode just on that. And I have talked a lot about just co-regulation, but it's a way easier to tap into this and get them into that metacognitive space when we can just validate, when they feel heard. Whew, it sounds like you've got a tough day. Nothing else. We say nothing. We don't want to start nagging or advice giving or problem solving because their emotional brain is just going to take over. When they feel heard and understood, when their prefrontal cortex self-regulating brain is back online, that's when we can guide them through with our open-ended questions. We're not going to be the problem solvers and fixers and reassurers and make you feel betterers, right? We're going to ask open-ended questions. What happened? What are you feeling? What were you thinking in that moment? What did you need in that moment? So we're helping them distinguish between, let's just say, it was a 10-year-old who was feeling rejected as well. Distinguish between feeling rejected versus being rejected. That really opens the space for reframing. And that's where my Columbo, okay, hold on. You said nobody likes you. So let's break this down. What about your teacher? I'm confused, and they're like, no, my teacher said, well, I'm really confused because you said nobody likes you. So help me understand here, right? We can kind of play dumb. Teens anxious about an upcoming exam, instead of defaulting to just study more or don't worry about it, right? We might say that anxiety is telling you something. It's telling me it sounds like that test is really important to you and you really want to do well, right? So we can help them see the function of that emotion. So there is still a lot of front loading that we want to do to teach kids that emotions serve a function, right? Be able to identify that emotion and how to evaluate emotions. And then we can start modeling it ourselves and applying it ourselves and then guiding them to do it themselves so that they can stop trying to stop the feelings. That's usually what a lot of them do. And we start to do that too. We try to shut down those feelings. Here, let's have some ice cream. We try to make them feel better, but they need to understand what's going on. So we can use things like emotion evaluation cards, or we can have guided journaling templates just to help build this reflective skill outside of the heat of the moment. The key skill is in the moment when that emotion is activated, but we want to do a lot of front loading, a lot of proactive teaching, and those are different ways that you can do it. Journaling is always helpful. If you've got kiddos who have a hard time expressing themselves in the moment, that can be helpful. But if you've got a kiddo who hates writing, right? Even though we want to externalize that internal experience, what are some other ways? Because that's really what we're trying to do. Pull out those internal experiences. When we can externalize it, we can hold them at an arm's length, right? So hopefully, like, this is really what we want to do. If kids are open to journaling and writing, that's going to help with building awareness, organizing those emotional events, evaluating them. It's activating that prefrontal self-regulating, rational thinking brain. It's increasing that self-regulation. When they can slow down, they're getting out of that reactive cycle. And when they're out of that reactive cycle, they have more space and reflective thought. And the more that they can do that, they can start to see patterns over time. Every time I feel left out, I assume no one likes me, when really that's not the case at all. Even younger kids can use visual journaling, right? Maybe they've got color-coded feelings or a picture of something hard, what they felt, what they wanted to do in that moment. So we want to help guide that process. For older kids, we would want to use similar sort of prompts. What happened? What did you feel? What was the emotion trying to tell you? What might it be protecting you from? What did you need right then, right now? Right? With the Socratic questioning, we're asking things, what is that feeling pinpointing that matters? It's those open-ended questions we really want to ask. You could have an emotion message decoder chart, right? So maybe you'd have anger, and so the possible message is something that feels unfair. And then the action might be, I got to clarify boundaries, or I need to ask for a change in my environment. Check out the show notes because I've included my emotions charts and some of the resources that I have made there to help support this. You can access those too, and you can tweak them however you want. But that's really giving kids and you, to be quite fair, a sort of decision tree. It's not just a feeling. We can't just sit around talking about, I'm feeling sad all day. Well, what now? Right? So it's a decision tree. What's next? So looking at that function of emotion chart can help kids connect to some of those common emotions, and connect those emotions to the purposes and typical needs. So again, just check out the show notes for all of that. Now, kids also need to learn that emotions are real and valid, but they're not always accurate. That's really important. Sometimes they're mismatched or they're misleading. And this is a big, I won't even get into. I mean, there's a great book, Coddling of the American Mind. Jonathan Haidt is a co-author with that. And a lot of books actually talk about this emotional reasoning. Because I'm sad, therefore, it's fact-based, and therefore we have to change everything because of it. But it can be misleading. So again, I love using optical illusions to show how things might always be as we actually are perceiving or experiencing them, right? Just because you took offense to something that I said doesn't mean that I was purposefully being offensive, for example, right? When we're looking at adult interactions, well, I'm totally upset because of what you said, right? And now it's you are being a jerk. Well, that's not always the case. Certainly, maybe someone is trying to be a jerk, but I always talk MGI. What's the most generous interpretation, right? Maybe the comment was a loving gesture. It was trying to be supportive. Kids often misinterpret our loving gestures when we're trying to be helpful, right? And so we really need them to understand that, yes, all emotions are valid. They're all normal. We need to have them, but they're not always accurate. Okay, so we can start to ask things like, what is this emotion based on? Is it a real threat? Like if I'm going into fight flight mode, fatality. catastrophe, right? Something really bad has happened. Or is it a story I'm trying to tell myself, or that the little henchman is telling myself, right? Am I using past experiences to predict the future, to predict now? That's what anxiety is. It's not in the present moment, right? It's using past experiences to predict worst case scenario outcomes. I do like scaling questions too, and then mapping those emotions onto it, because everything is a big deal in the heat of the moment. Everything is a 10 in awfulness, or 10 is for sure this is going to be terrible, right? So 10, my friend didn't text me back. It's the worst thing in the universe. I'm never going to manage it. I'm going to be the laughing ridicule of the school. My life is over. Okay. So then I might say, well, that's really awful, right? And what I'm going to say next is very extreme. So you really need to change it depending on the age of the kid, the anxiety of the kids, right? But I have said with my teens, who I know who can handle it and it's developmentally appropriate. So if I'm going to scale, they're saying 10, worst thing in the universe. My friend hasn't texted me back. It's been 3 minutes. Okay, so you think your friend now, who's not texted you within the past 3 minutes, is a 10. And I'm going to write it out on a scale. 10, worst thing in the universe. Yes, it's a 10. I, who am I to say, right? I can't say it's a big deal, little deal, but for them. But I'm going to help bring some more meaning to it. So then I can ask them, okay, so that's a 10. I'm just curious. What if you were in a car accident and you lost an arm and a leg? How awful would that be? Oh, well, that for sure would be a 10. Okay, so that's a 10 as well. So if that's a 10, would the friend not text you back right now in the 3 minutes? Would that still be a 10? So I'm just getting clarity. Then they would probably say, oh no, gosh, like that would be a 2. Or maybe it's not even on the scale anymore. So it's not me trying to tell them it's a big deal, little deal. They are now reappraising the situation. Now they can look at their emotion and it's more in line with a 2 when we're really looking at 10 as absolute catastrophe. So then we can guide them to ask, what was the story your brain or your henchmen were trying to tell you? That you're worthless, that you're going to be alone forever, that you're never going to have any other friends? What's another possible explanation? So if we wanted to look at reappraisal, but then that emotional evaluation, we would want to ask the thing, is that feeling helping or hurting you right now? And what emotion or behavior is most helpful for how you want to respond right now? I keep talking about whether strategies help or not. So that's the skill, that we want to get to. It's a different skill in and of itself. Really, just even differentiating helpful from unhelpful strategies is a skill. So again, lots of front loading here where we're explicitly teaching emotion regulation strategies that might be helpful, like acceptance, like reappraisal, or even just boundary setting or different options that I could be doing, right? The unhelpful ones are like suppression, avoidance. I'm going to go drink my stress away, binge watch Netflix away, whatever it is. So the process of evaluating emotions is really helping kids turn towards their emotions instead of ignoring or minimizing them or suppressing them, which is not good if they're doing those things. We want them to turn towards and experience the full depth of that emotion. That's really important in building resilience. And when they're doing that, they're keeping that prefrontal cortex online because they're getting curious instead of scared or angry or some other, overwhelming emotion. And we don't want to rob them of that opportunity either, to be able to turn towards and fully embrace exactly what's going on. Now, when they're using that emotional metacognition, that's building psychological flexibility, it's building their resilience, their decision-making capacity, and their ability to make those good choices. So reflecting on some of, those emotional experiences and decoding those emotional messages, that's really what this is. Emotions are not a problem to be fixed. They're a message to decode. That's what we really want to do, right? When we're building these skills. practice is important. They need to practice. You need to model all of these things and they need to practice all of these things. I have a bunch of resources in the show notes to help kids do this step by step. So definitely go and check those out because that can be really helpful. I know it sounds overwhelming and, feel free to reach out and ask me questions if you have any questions on how to implement this. So once we have this, the next step is aligning those emotional responses with their goals and values. What's important to them? Because those emotions, you know, and the henchmen, really, they can be little cult leader dictators. But when they can step back, when our kids can step back, hold these emotions at arm's length to really evaluate, get curious with them, they're not the dictator anymore. Kids can learn to use those emotions as data to help them manage them effectively. And that's where I'm going to be going into next week. So be sure to tune in. This is really just building that awareness so that they can then start making good choices. Right now, it's about being aware of their emotional experiences and differentiating the thing, their automatic response is helpful or not. So, the challenge this week is really you and kids paying attention to the next big emotion that comes up that you're expressing, that they're expressing. I say this because you need to practice the skill too. It's going to be good for you, it's going to be great modeling for kids. So pause and ask, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Right? And then maybe you can start looking at one small way to meet the underlying need. See what shifts. Maybe nothing shifts. Maybe everything shifts. That's all practice is about. It's about listening with curiosity and getting kids to trust themselves, right? And trying things out. No, that didn't work. Oh, yeah, that might work. And then I will have more specific things for next week, but we're just kind of scaffolding these skills. Be sure to check previous weeks, especially around understanding the function. And then last week I was going into some of those reappraisal pieces. So I know I probably should have one whole enclosed episode. I know it can be challenging to go back and listen to other ones if you miss them, but you can see there's so much to think about. And so it's hard to say, just do this in one episode, right? It's not like, well, you hear a lot of people who are just like, just give yourself a high five every morning and you'll be happy. It's not that easy. I wish it was that easy. That's why I'm giving you scaffolded skills to work on week by week. But in the meantime, it was a lot to think about. Help those kiddos be bold and courageous, and I will see you next week.